Welcome to the 0400 podcast, the podcast for dreamers. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
How we doing?
Good.
Yeah, man. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
And it's freezing outside. We're in winter.
It's 20 degrees for a Tennessee boy. That's pretty hard.
Well, it's literally freezing.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah.
We would die if we were naked outside right now for too long.
I watch a couple people on that have YouTube channels that like the one guy's like building a they're Canadians. You know, one guy's like building a cabin in the woods, and oftentimes, and they use Celsius there, but they'll convert it every now and then, and he's just out there working, and it's like 20 below.
Oof.
Jeez.
No big deal.
No thanks.
Man, that's tough.
No thank you.
Yeah, I'll pass on that one.
Well, I don't know. For the right adventure, I think it'd be fun. With the right jacket.
Not being naked.
Yeah. What do we got today? Drinking.
Today, we are not so sponsored by Muletown. But we know those guys over there. They're fantastic people. So even though they're not a sponsor, definitely check them out. I don't know their Instagram or website, but just look up Muletown Roasters, Columbia, Tennessee, and you'll find them.
They're great.
They're
delicious. Fantastic. And this is, I think, a Tanzanian?
Ooh.
Yes. No, Guatemalan. Single origin.
Wrong continent, bro.
But tasting notes. What are you guys tasting?
I get notes of caffeine, which is most important for me at 4 a.m.
Yes.
Yeah. It's delicious. I think my palate's not, as we've talked about before, it's not very refined, but I can taste when it's good coffee. Like that's the thing. It's like I have a binary system. It's either this is either like not good coffee or it's good coffee, and this is good coffee.
This has really light fruity
It's like
notes.
silkier.
Yes.
It's like it's got like a different texture.
For sure.
What do they say on there? Does it say anything?
But I like how you're like, I just know if it's good or bad. It reminds me of Ron Burgundy. You'd be like, this coffee is bad. Is it Ron Burgundy? Anchorman, I think.
I don't think so. Unless it was Anchorman 2.
It's either The Office or Anchorman where he's like, something is bad. This is bad. Someone in the comments help me out, all right? They said that the tasting notes are of cane sugar and tangerine. Definitely taste that kind of like light sweetness. Really delicious.
It's not as fruity as some, that I've had, like the really blueberry-y ones.
Yeah.
Which I can't remember what's that normal.
It's usually a Rwandan natural
that's right.
process.
This was much lighter on the fruit, but kind of it's nice. It's not too. Blah.
Yeah, for sure. Sweet.
Yeah.
Did you know that coffee used to be like a sacrament? Basically, it was like
I believe it, man.
It was like a spiritual, like the shaman are the ones that ground like had the coffee beans.
I'm a shaman, man.
Did you know that?
No.
Like back in the day,
That's so cool.
Like a cup of coffee. We take it for granted now, certainly in our culture, but back in the day, like coffee was mind-blowing.
Oh, yeah.
It was kind of,
yeah.
Go ahead, yeah.
No, finish your thought, man.
Well, I mean, kind of like anything would have been mind-blowing back then, like you could, you know what I mean? Like I don't even know about like going back in time and like showing them TV, that would be like so mind-blowing. I don't even know what they would do, but like just go back in time and like show them like a Bic lighter, and you're king of the world now.
Two things to say about that. One, there's a really cool video I saw of a person meeting a tribe in the Amazon for the first time, and the people, it's a very primitive tribe. They show them a mirror, and the guy sees his reflection for the first time, and he has no idea what to do with it. Like when you think about like the only water they have is the rushing Amazon. And so he's probably never seen a clear pool of water where he can see reflection. And when he saw himself in a mirror, it was like looking at an alien. He was like, "Who is this person?"
Yeah,
very cool. Secondly, there was a direct correlation between when caffeine comes to a culture and the productivity of the culture.
Yeah,
like seriously, like the Enlightenment, a few hundred years ago, coincided with when tea and coffee made it to the West, which is very fascinating. And about whatever it was 500 or 600 years before that, it was when they had a lot of the insane growth in the Middle East, in the whatever, I can't remember the name of the culture at the time there, but when they were doing all the math and stuff was directly coincided with when they got coffee.
Wow.
So it's like it does something to the brain.
And the
you know?
Industrial Revolution, because people at that time, to really have in mass water that could be drank, it had to be distilled. That was like one of the easiest ways, either that or boiled. And so essentially people were like buzzed and drunk all the time, like trying to do work, like hard manual labor. So, I mean, if anyone just stopped drinking, day drinking all the time, they're going to be productive, but especially if they're given a drug instead of alcohol, which I guess alcohol is a drug, right?
Technically.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a drug you drink.
Yeah.
Anything that alters, I think, the brain chemistry I could say was probably a drug.
Yeah, that was a fascinating thing to hear. I think you were the one that told me about that. Was because the safest way to drink anything was when it was fermented, right? Mm-hmm. And so rather than just drinking water from the well, people just drank beer all day long when they were farming.
Yeah, like in Bible times, for weddings and stuff like that. That's why wine was so prevalent. It wasn't even so much like that. It's about that they're sitting down with a Cabernet, like, this is nice. Yeah, it's a great wedding. But it's like necessity. It's truly necessity. Alcohol was needed back then.
Huh. So shaman, coffee bean. Enlightenment, caffeine. Mm-hmm. Industrial Revolution, cocaine. Right? I mean, that's where cocaine started making its hit. So there's something about
rock and roll, marijuana.
Something about amphetamines. So something about stimulation and dreaming. Something about stimulation and progress, or new ideas and innovation. I don't know. Just an interesting correlation.
Yeah, a few months ago, I attempted to stop drinking coffee because I had blood pressure stuff going on, right? And so I switched completely to decaf, and I felt like there was part of it was probably how much coffee I was drinking, but I also felt like even when I got past the withdrawals, there was kind of like a veil between me and everything else. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, I wonder when this feeling's going to go away. And my friend Miles said, maybe this is just how reality feels without caffeine. And I was like, oh,
no thanks.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm more controlled now. I'm to 1 cup a day, but even that 1 cup, it changes my morning.
That's what I realized is like the good cruising altitude is 1 cup a day. If you go beyond that, you start to get too amped and get the withdrawal symptoms. But I've gone between 1 cup a day and no cup a day, and I've felt no difference, thankfully.
And have y'all ever gone down the rabbit hole of bulletproof coffee?
Yeah.
I've heard of it, but I've never tried it.
It's where you blend in butter and MCT oil,
which is a coconut derivative.
Delicious. It's delicious. If you're not fasting in the morning, it's like a meal replacement, but it gets your brain, because instead of the antsy feeling that caffeine will get you, it curbs that with the fat.
It's kind of high.
It's
like a brain tingling.
It's like a nootropic. It's I've tried it. I don't. If I'm not doing intermittent fasting or something like that, every once in a while I'll do that. It's pretty wild.
We'll have to do that one day.
I'm down to try that for sure.
Yeah. So this isn't a coffee podcast, but we definitely probably should have a coffee sponsor at this point.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
What about Muletown? Because they're local, aren't they?
Yeah, we talked to Matt and Chris.
There you go. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, I'm down.
All right, 5-minute share.
They can sponsor us in beans, really.
Yeah,
that'd be nice, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got something to share with you guys. I ashamedly found this in not the best way. I found this on Instagram with an inspirational quote, because I guess I've been following Stoic philosophy and some other things. And so Viktor Frankl and stuff like that comes up, and there's been some quotes that have made me ponder for sure. Most of it's just whatever, just kind of scroll past it. Nothing to think about twice. This one I kind of scrolled past, and then I mulled it over for days. I couldn't get off my mind. So I was trying to work it out in my brain. That is, Tolstoy says, respect was invented to cover the empty place where love should be. So I'll do it one more time. Respect was invented to cover the empty place where love should be. I was thinking about that, the applicability of it. And and trying to figure out, is that true or is it not? Where does love fall into place? Where does respect fall into place? And so I was thinking like marriage, let's say, or let's say you're dating somebody, married, partner, whatever. You guys are busy, as we all are. You don't get to see each other throughout the week, as we oftentimes do. And but on Friday, you guys go out, get a babysitter. You have one-on-one time where you go out and you have a really nice meal, great conversation. You catch up. You feel intimately connected with that person. You go back. You even intimately connect physically. At the end of the day, of that connection, I think the last thing on your mind would be respect, because you're so full of love. But also the question, I guess, that I pass on to you guys is, where does respect fall into love? Are they equal? Does respect somehow fit into love, or are they completely separate?
Wow.
Man, I mean, first off, Tolstoy, amazing.
Yeah, deep cut.
I just started getting into him.
Dude, so
Real
the
deep.
Russians do great literature, and they do great music. I'm just saying, Tchaikovsky, he was a creep, but he was one of the best composers of all time. Even if you don't like classical music, you would know most of what he wrote. And then you have Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, and I just finished sorry, I'm going to be going on a tangent, so I'm going to come back to the respect, but I just finished a book that's going to be on our reading list. It's called Loris by, his name is Vodolezkin, and he's kind of like a modern Dostoevsky, Orthodox Christian, and this book was absolutely fantastic. If we have time today, I'm going to talk about it.
Yes, please.
Okay.
So first off, Tolstoy, great, love it. Respect and love, I feel like they go hand in hand. I mean, there's this book I read before I got married called Love and Respect. I don't know if you've read that book.
I was going to bring that up, dude.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to,
No.
steal your thunder.
No,
but it's like,
absolutely not.
I think it's very interesting. The premise of the book was that men value feeling respected more than they value feeling loved, if I remember correctly. And it's the reverse for women. And almost like the idea, would you rather be respected and know that people like fear and dislike you? Or would you rather be loved but feel like them feel like you're kind of incompetent as a person? You know what I'm saying? Like, or not capable. So there's no respect there. And I feel like, I don't know how to answer that question, but I'm probably not the right barometer for that, because I'm not like the industrious guy that wants to go start a factory, and I don't care to be feared.
I like this.
Yeah, whatever that is.
Yeah, I don't care to be feared. I don't want to be feared, unless there's a moment where I have to turn on the monster.
Oh yeah.
That being said, I think they go hand in hand. I think that respect, how I would love and respect Sydney as my wife, right? Just as an example, had a very long week at work. One of our guys was out with the Rona, so it all fell, all the kids' classes, everything fell on me. And, I had a really tough training session yesterday. I taught the morning class, I was up early. So I skipped last night's training session and went home and to do homework for grad school. So it wasn't like I was just hanging out. But I was like, I think it would make Sydney happy if I unloaded the dishwasher. And so I think in that way, it's that is an act of love, and it's also an act of respecting her time too. Because she would come home, she's had a long day as well. And if I didn't do it, she would have to do it,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I kind of, as much as I love Tolstoy, I kind of disagree, but not fully. Because at the same time, I see someone on the street and I can love them in a different way than I love, obviously, you guys or love Sydney, because I don't know them, but I can still respect them. So even if there's not that deep love, you can still show someone respect, and that's an act of love to them, at least to the extent that you can.
One other thing I want to add here about that, because I'm going down the same path of kind of the dichotomy between okay, does it fit into love, or is it fully separate? So I kind of built that caricature, of the date day of the representation of love. A caricature I build for for respect, is like, I think of like respect me, like 1950s type of relationship where the typical nuclear family, but much more in the
Rodney
traditional
Dangerfield.
roles. Yeah.
Don't get no respect, I tell you. Oh, that was terrible.
You got to get more gravel in your voice.
Don't get any respect, I tell you. I'm terrible at impressions and accents, but that doesn't stop
Your
me.
Scottish is pretty good.
Anyone that knows me, that doesn't stop me.
I love that. But yeah, that's what I think about with respect is like, the respect me. And it makes me think to that question of love versus respect. Is respect not bound to pride?
In what way? What do you mean? I think I know what you mean.
If you're wanting respect, is that not ultimately like a prideful statement of like I want to be more valued? And it's not even so much like a yearning of love, but more of a yearning for attention or a yearning for some kind of validation that's not in just complete connection.
Yeah, I think there's a difference in like asking for respect or trying to get respect, and it just emanating with pride too. Like there's pride, like the pride of a lion, and then there's pride coming from like an insecurity or an insecure place of like I got my pride. So pride is that door can swing both ways. So yeah, I think. Yeah, it's kind of like that blend between being nice and being kind. Love and respect. I guess respect would be nice and love would be kindness. But yeah, pride.
Let me just add, because I think y'all are right to an extent. But I think, once again, it's the importance of language, right? The importance of words. I think the English language is very versatile, but it also is limiting because, and this might also just be a symptom of our culture now, but the fact that I can express my enjoyment of Taco Bell in the same way that I express my admiration for my wife is sad. Because I could say I love Taco Bell, and if I were to say to someone, "Yeah, I like Taco Bell," they're like, "Do you really?" Even though the word "like" means you enjoy, and that's what I mean by love. Like I really enjoy, and I'm just using Taco Bell as an example, right? I do like Taco Bell.
Crunchwrap Supreme.
Yeah. Dang. So, but that's the thing. It's like in other languages, in the Greek language, there were, I think, 4 words for love that all describe different aspects.
Eros, agape,
Philos.
philos for brotherly. What's the other one? I always forget the other. I can't remember. There's a 4th one.
Yeah.
At
least a 4th one. I think there might even be a 5th. But in English, we just have the word love, and we live in such a hyperbolic culture. It's like the fact that we can't separate between our enjoyment of something and our admiration for the person that's most important to us, I think is probably a deeper symptom than we actually give it credit for. So the same thing with respect and pride, like we were talking about. There is a pride that's positive. That's like, yes, right? I'm proud of my nephew. I'm proud of my wife for getting out there and doing the battle for the blue belt and fighting. And I'm like, yes, this is good. Then there's a pride that comes from insecurity. In the same way, there's a respect that comes, like a demand for respect that comes from insecurity. And then there's gravitas. You meet those people that carry weight in the room, and you can't help but like look at them and be like, wow, that's admirable. So if I want respect, it's because it's earned respect, because I'm an admirable person. And I have gravitas.
And that's even respect you can offer your enemies.
Yeah.
That you can respect them. And in fact, if you don't respect them, it's probably to your own detriment. Going back to I want to bounce off of you and going back to your original question about love and respect. I think you can have one without the other, but it doesn't work both ways. You know what I mean? Like, to your point, respect, I'd be curious to know the different iterations of what that word means. Because it could be awe. It could be like ethics. You know what I mean? It could be a lot of different things. I think you can have respect without love. Like you can respect an enemy. But you can't have love without respect. You know what I mean? It's not love then. I think it's interesting that in the fruit of the Spirit, respect isn't one of them. You know what I mean? But here's a little tidbit I want to offer here. Kick off of y'all is always reading up on research and surveys and stuff in the psychology world for what I do, and they're always interesting. And one of the things, one of them that came out is they surveyed a bunch of people in relationship and asking, some common questions like inside that are often found inside a relationship. And one of the things that came out is the number one complaint that women have to their male partners is, can you guys guess what it is? It's the number one answer that comes up on the number one complaint that females have towards their male partners.
They don't listen.
Yep. That's it. That's the number one thing. You're not listening to me. So just think about that. And anyone that's in a relationship, just think about if that's come up. And then on the other side of it, the number one complaint that men have to their female partners. Do you have a guess?
They don't listen?
She doesn't respect me. That's the number one complaint. And I think that means something and says something perhaps about the masculine and feminine kind of dynamic. That the number one thing that, generally speaking, that women, based on the survey, keep running into, it's like, man, this is just the thing, is he doesn't listen to me. And then he makes me think about that. What about the nail video? If anyone hasn't seen that, where generally speaking, men are kind of more wired to fix, and women are more wired to connect, and so we can miss each other in a conversation. And so, kind of going into that, if you remember the video, she's telling him about this nail that's in her head, but she doesn't see the nail. But she's just describing the pain. Yeah. And he's looking at her and he's trying to get the nail out. And she's upset because you're not listening to me. It's not about the nail. And from the male's perspective, they're both right in some beautiful ways, which is why the video is hilarious and has like 100 million views or something. But he's trying to get the nail out. And so in her mind, in that conversation, that he's not hearing her. You're not listening to me. I'm describing the pain. And he was listening, but from a different perspective. So it's interesting. And then from the other side, the number one complaint from men is that she doesn't respect me. So think back into your relationship or relationships that you've been in. And is that something as a man that comes up for you? And that goes back to the pride thing, because some men demand that the woman respects them, but they act like fools, or they're immature. And that's where it kind of flips.
I want to add something there. I think that's really interesting. What's really interesting about that, I think, primarily is that there's a common thread there, and that thread is that there's miscommunications, right? Like she doesn't feel like she's heard. He doesn't feel like he's valued for the things that he's doing. My point, and what I was saying previously about, love and respect, is if your partner is not communicating that they respect you, isn't that somehow tied into love? Because it's like she's not communicating in some way that I'm loved and appreciated. She's not communicating well enough of the things that I do or what I contribute. And I think that isn't that just a communication of love, and not even like respect, like you said, it's so vague, right? There's pure forms of love, but is there a pure form of respect?
Oh, I absolutely believe you're right on the money with that. Because, once again, words are words and they have many different meanings. But like if I were showing up to a meeting really late, they may feel like I was not respectful of their time. And I would say, I'm sorry, I want to respect your time, so I'm going to let you, in that's an act of like service almost, and also just being a kind person, because at the end of the day, everyone's busy, and so you can respect someone's time, you can respect someone's character, which it means like you have like an admiration. I think I totally. Here's one thing, and I hope Sydney won't get mad at me for this. We
I
communicate.
get so excited when you start.
I know.
sentences
No,
like
I mean,
that.
we communicate
Oh, boy.
so well. Sydney and I communicate so well because we both are, we both have our quirks, right? And there are some times where she'll say something to me in a tone that's hurtful, where I feel like I'm being talked to like a child, and I'll say, I didn't like that. She's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that, and she's so quick to apologize there because she loves me and she knows that it makes me feel bad when she speaks to me that way. And it's not because I'm demanding respect. It's just at the end of the day, it's like it feels like I want to be valued as a man as well. And there are other times where I say things and I come across too harsh. Mm-hmm. Like sometimes I can be not aggressive, but maybe cold, mm-hmm. or just more just like direct in a way that can be kind of barbed. Mm. And she'll tell me I didn't like that. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. Like, and that's just natural in relationships. You're going to run into those sort of disagreements. I think I think the respect part of that is we recognize when what we've done has been hurtful and we apologize. And that's both an act of love and respect. And I don't think you can take those two things apart,
So it sounds like we should take out respect and maybe insert valued.
Maybe to an extent.
I could see that. But
For most people.
my first reaction was like, I don't know. The further we get into this conversation, I don't want to take out respect. I think it's good to happen there. But yeah, I see what you're saying. You're actually coloring the word now a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ultimately, the highest form of respect, I think, is awe. It's reverence. It's perhaps even worship. Maybe that's like the top of the pyramid where love and respect come together. Is this moment of, I'm so small compared to you or compared to this.
Interesting.
But yeah, the pride thing's an interesting way to kind of parse that up because it can go wrong. It can, like in our brokenness, we can try to demand it. I guess trying to demand it, even trying to demand love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think maybe it's for respect. It's because you can love someone but still not treat them with respect all the time. You may still have that love. So
true.
Respect may be this a component, but not the fullness, right? Mm-hmm. But for example, if you decide to voice something that matters to you, the person that loves you, if they love you, hopefully will hear that and say, okay, I want to respect that that's something that he values, that he or she values. Maybe it's not even valuing you because that is kind of wrapped up in love. But the respect is more so about external things. Like Sydney, it hurts my feelings when you talk to me that way. And in the respect isn't, okay, yes, I'll do what you say. It's, okay, I love you, and so I want to respect the fact that is something that's important to you. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. I love that y'all do that. I mean, that's so good and healthy.
Yeah,
and comforting to hear. Yeah, I keep coming back to this as as we all just kind of. I love the format of this podcast because we. Lacey's been listening to a few episodes, and which has been super cool because I kind of set it up where it's like, you don't, kind of nonchalant, like, oh, you don't have to listen to it, no big deal. But inside, I'm like, I want her to listen to it, and I want her to we had this conversation 2 days ago, where I was like, you don't have to listen to that, I don't want you to feel obligated, and I'm just like buffering myself because really I want her to listen to it, and really I want her to totally admire me, oh, my husband's amazing. Which all comes from, it's this desire I want to be respected by her in that way. So I actually confessed that the other day. I was like, anyway, I was kind of going around about what I really wanted, but I can't force her to like it or force that admiration or anything like that. But it was just kind of a funny thing to be honest about. But yeah, I keep coming back to that division between trying to demand it, trying to earn it. So respect, love, trust. Is it something, because you can look at it both ways. Is it something that do you let's say trust, is trust earned or is it given? You know what I mean? both. There's both. You can apply it both ways. Is love earned or is it given? I could see. Well, maybe I don't know if you can earn love. I don't know, but maybe that one's a little bit different. But respect, is it earned or is it given? And in what are in who and what are we respecting? A person, an idea, an institution. Like for instance, like the office of the president. It shouldn't matter who's in there. In my view, there needs to be a respect for the office, that kind of thing. So that's like a respect for like a chair. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, first rule of firearms: if the day you stop respecting your weapons, the day you need to not pick it up ever again. Mm-hmm. Or with motorcycles, that's like everyone when you ride motorcycles. When I bought my bike years ago. That was the first thing that the guy I bought it from. He's like, "Is this your first bike?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I was just like a kid, and I bought this crotch rocket. It's amazing. This Yamaha R6. And the first thing he said was, "Hey, the day you're not afraid of this thing is the day you sell it." It was interesting.
So, in that, is that once again just an imperfection of language, in the sense that is fear built into respect? Naturally, or is it just a type of respect? Because once again, like, I think you can be respectful without having fear. Mm-hmm. But I think it's part of it, especially in the case of like a motorcycle or a gun, right? Or
something dangerous.
Yeah, something dangerous.
Isn't it interesting? I'm sorry to cut you off.
You're good.
Isn't it interesting? Some of the verbiage in the Bible that's always been like, what does that mean? Is the fear of the Lord. Yeah. Like to fear God. Because I'm like, what does that really mean? To fear God? Like, isn't it supposed to be like this loving, safe thing? Like the eagle in the nest, and I'm like safe in the wings. But there's like a fear. And like, what does that mean to fear God? Because you're on the path if you fear him. And that, to kind of tip in the hat to you, maybe that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, the fear of God's the beginning of wisdom.
Yeah.
What does that mean? And maybe it's just the capability, Like I think there's the verse that Jesus says, like, don't be afraid of the man who can kill the body but not kill the soul. Be afraid of the one who can, destroy both soul and body. Interestingly enough, I think if you continue with the context there, he's not saying that that's God's desire is to destroy the soul, but that's something he's capable of. And yet here is the way out, right? Here is the pathway. Yeah. And so it's like once again, we talked about Aslan last week, and we're going to talk about him again. That the idea that Aslan had gravitas in the Chronicles of Narnia. He walked into a place and every eye was on him. And he was a lion, but he was kind. And he was good. But if he had to, he was still a lion, right? That's someone you respect, because cross him in the wrong way and you do not have the strength or capability to deal with the power of that lion.
Yeah.
But you also know that in love, when the relationship's in righteousness and in rightness, that is a power and a strength that isn't oriented towards mayhem, but oriented towards loving. What's the word I'm looking for? Deeply and richly.
Yeah.
Like you can orient that power into how deep you can love someone or how deep you can serve someone. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, to play off of that, and this is going to be a generalization, I guess, but in a relationship between a man and a woman, like, if I could be so bold as to, like, let's say maybe a lion represents the man. And so there's a respect, kind of like what we talked about last week, a respect for like the danger and the strength. And for the woman, maybe it's like the respect you have for the ocean. This deep and unfathomable mystery that's meant to be explored in beauty. Yeah, the feminine nature. And yeah, I love that. And I actually touched on that recently, seeing just being able to bear witness to the incredible experience of seeing my wife, this person that I love more deeply than anyone on the planet, to see her experience the birthing process and give birth and embody the feminine nature to such a degree of like, it was so deep and powerful and majestic and mysterious. And it's like, oh my God. And to see her holding the baby and doing all those mommy things, it's like, there is a deep respect there. It's like the ocean. It's beautiful. And it's the call to adventure is to explore her, in her femininity. And, there's a respect there, It's
and
like
there's a
that,
strength
this
there.
thing could swallow you up too.
Yeah.
In the mystery, Yeah.
Yeah, there's a strength. It's so interesting, archetypally represented, the siren, in Greek mythology. The ultimate beauty that can, as you said, swallow you up if you aren't careful, Like there's just something about that's Medusa. She looks at you, you turn to stone, you freeze, I think it's very interesting that she's also has a head full of snakes. That's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, I think it's very, like, you hear the stories of mothers who in a moment of need are able to like lift cars off of their children.
Mm-hmm.
There's a deep, rich, like primal strength that they carry. And it's very interesting that is being scorned as old fashioned when there's just something that's just, there's this pinnacle of strength and beauty and power in motherhood that I think is just so cool that y'all are getting to witness. And I'm excited that one day I'll get to witness it as well. Mm-hmm. But yeah. So yeah, there's respect in that way. And then there's like the self-sacrifice of man, essentially, like throughout time, we're the ones that went to war. We're ultimately expendable, like if it came down to it, one man could repopulate, the earth. So we're expendable. And so, but there's like, you think about something else that's respectable is my grandparents, my grandfathers, World War II, they both were in the army. And they believed in something so much that they were willing to die as young men. They joined willingly. So they weren't drafted. They were like, I'm signing up, if I remember correctly.
Without even knowing what they're getting into.
Exactly.
I mean, history and hindsight, we know what the war was like, and we know that we won.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't know any of that. They just knew that, hey, here's this thing happening, and a bunch of people were like, all right, I'm in.
Yeah, it's like with what's happening now, it's like if Russia invaded Ukraine like they're planning to do, and we're like, let's go get them. But we have no context to know how that's going to pan out entirely.
That sounds cold.
It does sound cold.
Bring a jacket if you're going.
But see, so that's respectable. Like that is that's something you can look at and say, I respect those people because of their character. They're worthy of my respect for their sacrifice. And then for like a mother, like to love a child well and to have the strength to intentionally raise a child, and do all the other things that are expected of women to do, like, and do it with a good heart and good nature, that's respectable. That's someone who's worthy of our respect. And so I think coming back around to it is, I think there's a healthy respect that is earned and an unhealthy respect that's demanded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Man,
Respect.
you have such a rich legacy.
Yeah.
Hearing about your family and you talking about your dad, and I can't wait to meet your dad.
That's
and you too,
you've
too,
never
Jay.
met my dad.
No, I've never met. I met your
Really?
brother.
So great, man.
Yeah,
They're like the Cleavers. When you first meet them, you're like, there's no way this family's actually like this. At least I felt that way. And then they welcomed me into their family, and I was there like every weekend, literally every weekend. And yeah, just like showered with food and all the good things that a
Just
teenager
kinda
needs.
Like a little segue, but not for long. I think it was last time I was there, not this Christmas, but the last time. The first thing we did when we got to the house, and it's spontaneous, we don't plan this, is my dad had Earth, Wind, and Fire playing on the vinyl on the record player, and literally we all just had like a 30-minute dance party in the kitchen. Like that's the kind of stuff that my family just does, just
Amazing.
off the cuff, and it's just fun.
And anyone that knows, I think this is true about your whole family, but they can all sing.
Yeah.
Isn't that unfair? you got all the good stuff. All the blood that was coursing through your grandfather's veins when they joined the war. That blood's coursing through you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you have access to the earned strength that they passed down. It's very metaphysical, but that's like a thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like we inherit from our fathers all the way down the line. How often? Anyway, I guess this is tangential, so I can back off.
I love it.
This idea of ancestry and ancestors, and how we don't really think about it. But we owe everything to them. We are the product of all their choices.
It's interesting. I real quick. My grandfathers. So my great grandfather on my mom's side was born during the Civil War. So my
Wait, say that again?
My great grandfather on my mom's side was born during the Civil War. And so
you're only a few generations from Antietam.
And my grandfather was the youngest of 13 and was born in 1916. And so if he were still alive today, he'd be 105, 106 almost. So it was very spread out. So, but my grandfather on my mother's side, he was in the Pacific Theater during World War II and actually got shot in the head and survived.
Jeez.
And he came back and he loved to work with his hands. He loved carpentry. And just, he died when I was 7. And so there's very little that I remember about him. Like specific instances, but I remember who he was from what I could understand as a 7-year-old. And he was gentle and he was good.
That's the meekness that we were talking about, probably.
What he's capable of, and then who he was when he was able to rest and be himself. I remember like he lived with us. He had cancer. He lived with us for a while in our basement, and I would go curl up with him in his bed down there, and we'd watch boxing. And he loved boxing. He loved watching boxing. And I just remember his voice, and so really excited to get to see him again one day, and I believe I will.
Yeah.
But he had strength, and he was a great father to my mom. And my father on my grandfather on my dad's side, he was the most generous man I've ever known. And he was funny. He had a humor that he could just like make anything funny. And he was well respected because of who he was. They flew the flag at half-mast in his town the day of his funeral. Like that is a legacy, man. Like he was so influential in that community. They put the flag at half-mast. I don't even know if that's really allowed or not. I think the government has kind of like sanctioned that, but they did it.
Wow.
And so yeah, that's the sort of thing that I really find really cool. And I wrote a song one time called "Carry Their Name," and I was just kind of musing upon the mystery of that, and you said, the same blood courses through their veins. The chorus says, "Who they were is who you are. They aren't here, but they aren't far. The same blood runs through your veins. So thank the Lord for those behind, faces lost to the winds of time, and carry their name."
Yeah.
And one of the things I was musing on in there is it's in the color of your eyes. It's in the name your mama calls you. It's in your grandmother's pecan pie recipe. Like there's this legacy of family that goes back to the beginning of time that just one or two changes. If my grandfather had died when he got shot, I wouldn't be here, Yeah. So it's every person's a miracle. Every person's a miracle when you look at what could have happened and what is now, Yeah. Anyways, tangent, but I think it's powerful to think on that with gratitude. And I know that everyone's family is not perfect. There are families that are horribly dysfunctional and that hurt people, but you're here and you have the power to now, everyone listening, you have the power to take whatever was done to you and break cycles of victimization, break cycles of trauma, and you get to start the legacy that in 2 or 3 generations you're being talked about as the man or woman that was worthy of being respected.
Yeah.
And so I encourage you, the things you know you need to be doing to create a legacy to leave behind that's positive and that's good for the world, start that today.
Right. Memento mori, right? Remember you will die. And in remembering that we will die, we have to think about the legacy that we leave behind. And you can pass down your legacy. You can either pass down your legacy of the trauma that you've experienced and that your family has experienced, or you could change it. So where do you want to fall? What do you want to be known for? And legacy doesn't happen in some, ethereal future. It happens right now in the little moments and hard decisions. That's where legacy lies.
Brent, you said something one time that has stuck with me. I don't know if this was originally your quote or if it's something you just use, but I use it all the time now. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Yeah.
Things that happen to you that are horrible, it's not your fault that they happen to you, but it is your responsibility to make something with it. And I would like to hear from your perspective as a counselor what that looks like. Like what do you think is the process for someone who is, maybe since we're talking about family, right? Since we've gone off on that family tangent now, what do you say to someone who has a family that has broken them, and how do they start to go about changing that legacy?
Wow. Well, there's no nutshell answer that can be sufficient for the depth and the gravity of that. But maybe in some ways it has everything to do with respect and love. You respect the person's wound. You respect the person that's been wounded. And you love them. It happens all the time, and it happens in our lives that we inherit things, or kind of this, in that dichotomy of what can I control and what can I not control, which is very important to audit for yourself in many different ways. Very, very important. We can expound on that probably in a whole different podcast. But one of the things that we can't control is what we've been given. We're totally powerless and vulnerable as children. So we have to attach. We have to attach to whoever and whatever's around. And depending on whoever and whatever's around, that attachment can either totally empower us or cripple us later in life. We inherit. I think the last week we were talking about mimicry and mimicking and mirroring. It was so cool. Yesterday I saw Amos mirror Lacey. She was eating something and Amos starts going. It was so cute. And so like, oh, he's mirroring. It was so cool to see this up front. I've been reading about it for so long. But yeah, it's not your fault that, let's say you inherited an alcoholism, a disposition towards alcoholism, for instance. That's not your fault. And it is your responsibility. You know what I mean? It's not your fault. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like some of that feeling of like life's not fair, At some level, you kind of have to deal with that. It's not fair. But it is your responsibility, meaning you're allowed to feel that injustice. And we want to be in that space, and honor it. But you can't stay there. At some point, you got to stand up and walk out of there. And this is like, especially in trauma, there's a lot of people who, and it makes sense why we do this, who identify so strongly with their trauma that it becomes their identity. Like I'm a such and such survivor, or I guess in the case of alcoholism, like I'm a child of an adult alcoholic, or I'm an adult child of an alcoholic, or I'm an alcoholic, or whatever the thing is, But I think there's some trappings in that too, in regards to identifying too much with your wound, because again, suffering is not the story. It's the adversary or the mechanism or the agent. It's the inciting thing. love, belonging is the story. Like when you drill down deep enough, that's the story. So whatever you've inherited or whatever your trauma might be, or let's say it was a belligerent parent or something like that. Again, that's not your fault. And I have all the compassion and hopefully can muster all the capacity to love that person well in that place. And eventually we gotta, and you get to choose, like, I'm not going to push you, but just know, like, I'm going to sit here as long as we can, as you need to. Just know that eventually, I mean, the choice is yours. You can stay here. But the call is, at some point, to stand up and walk out of that, where you don't so deeply identify with the trauma anymore. You know, I think
because you lose part of your individualism in the moment, where you embody the trauma instead of it being a part of your story and moving from it.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, we are being kind of carved by the great artist. You know, like we are being chipped away at, and so there are certain wounds that really empower and that impact us and really empower our story when we certainly when we experience redemption. Like those things that threw us into hell become the very thing that like bring us into heaven when we experience redemption. And but we can't identify too strongly with the wound, I think, because then it won't fully heal and it'll kind of inhibit us from being able to move out of it. So I guess I could go I guess I don't want to go off on tangents with that, but going back to your question about it's not your fault, but it's your responsibility, which I think that most of my stuff is borrowed, you know, it's things that I've read or picked up or heard somewhere, and I just kind of synthesize it. But I think that is something I said, like that actually is like mine.
I use that as well. So I don't know if it's from you.
Maybe it's not mine.
No.
I heard it from you the first time for sure.
It's kind of like Pete Townsend from The Who was interviewed years ago, because remember in like the 80s and 90s, hip hop artists and pop artists were sampling stuff for the first time, and it was like this big copyright issue, like what is that all? And so a bunch of people were suing each other, like you can't use that, and like doom 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 doom, right? Yeah. All that. But anyway, Pete Townsend was asked about one of the Who guitar chords that was ripped into like someone sampled it and created a whole song, and he never sued them. And he was asked about that, like, why didn't you pursue that? You know, like that's like millions of dollars. And he said something like, it's, hey man, it's all just 3 chords, you know, like this is what we're all doing. We're all robbing from everybody. Yeah. That's how it works. Mm-hmm. We synthesize what's already here. We receive what's been passed down to us and we create something new with it, but it's not new necessarily.
A question I have going off of what Spencer said, and this might be too big of a ask, because again, it's really, you're our therapist here. So if it's hard to answer, that's fine. But trying to think pragmatically about what Spencer was asking. Let's say we have listeners who feel as though their trauma or whatever's holding them back is, too much to bear. They don't know where to begin of changing their legacy into something that empowers them, that can become a part of their story and character. Where would be a good place to start? We obviously have great therapists. There's great resources. Maybe give them a spectrum. Like if you're like, and obviously it's very interpersonal, right? So it would be hard to exactly diagnose, but what would be some good avenues for people to consider of different financial bearings, who can afford a book, or some people can afford therapy sessions. What would be a good place to look?
Yeah. Specifically about people that have had trauma?
Yeah, overcoming trauma.
Yeah. Well, the governing word for trauma over the years has been suffering. Trauma is like this new word that we use, but it's just suffering. It's something that was an intense enough amount of pain or fear, or both. That's what trauma is. That's what suffering is. So it's universal. So the first thing I would do is just normalize it. Like we all get it to some degree, and it's not fair. It's not equitable in how it's parsed out. Some people, holy cow, man, hearing some stories of people's childhoods and what they had to endure, it's like, oh my God. there's so much respect that they're even alive, you know? So I would normalize it first, but man, you gotta notice where it hurts. That's your responsibility. Your body, your life, no matter what's been passed down to you or what's happened to you, this is like an ownership piece. I don't think we can heal our wound until we own them. And that's not owning, like if you're a victim of some terrible thing, that's not like owning that you deserve that or owning that it's okay that happened, but it's owning that, hey, I'm looking at you and I see that thing's festering. Now, I would love to know the story about how that happened, but importantly, like that needs, like, what do you want to do with that? Like, do you want to heal that? And that means you got to look at it, and that means, you know, so therapy, there's therapy's obviously a great way to do that. And not every therapist is the same. I would go to an existential one. Because there's the kind of two layers to therapy, you know, there's like the coping skills crew, where it's like how to mitigate stress and grief and anxiety and how to like learn how to like get your feet under you and kind of manage. And so that's fine. Cause that's successful. Like that's better than what I was. Learn how to deal with that. But the call to adventure isn't going into the deep waters. Like, you can learn how to manage it, and I would say that's victory number 1, because that's going to help you. But then the call to adventure is victory number 2. Is now that you kind of know that you can kind of be okay in that. It's not necessarily comfortable, but victory number 2, the kind of that call is like, maybe you can heal that. Maybe you don't need to manage it eventually. And so, as far as different financial points, you know, I mean, therapy in general, there's so many different ways you can afford it now. But yeah, books. I mean, whatever you're...
Maybe journaling, because you said maybe the first step would be just getting it out there, knowing where it hurts, and just to try to express what's happened and try to understand it. It's just some kind of writing practice, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Write it down. I mean, talking about stoicism, that's kind of the whole thing, is like write it down. That's it. By writing something down, you're already like 10x into solving it or whatever it is. And so, yeah, I mean, journaling, all kinds of books, spiritual communities, you know, those spiritual communities are how suffering has been dealt with forever. And I love that. It seems to be like we're coming back to that in the secular world. We're coming back to that, and just in different ways. But yeah, the other thing too, especially for men, is we've been kind of sold this whole John Wayne thing, you know, and we've talked about it a little bit. That's not real. John Wayne isn't John Wayne. Right. You know what I mean? It's a character that he's played, and it's kind of an archetype. But this whole and it's also like an interesting view into how our culture sees itself at that time, and that's carried over to this time. Kind of the whole independent, I don't need anybody, and self-reliant and all that, and those are all beautiful things in the right context. But the number one thing, and maybe I see with men in particular, is, you know, we get the wound and we're just like, 'tis but the flesh wound, and you know, we kind of downplay it. And I joke with Lacey. She saw me bail one time. We were in this river with our dogs, kind of playing around, and I slipped and like hit my knee, and it really hit that. Oh God, it hurt so bad. Even to this day, my knee cracks when I bend over. And I got up so fast, like, oh, no big deal here. But she saw what happened, and it was kind of this joke, like, you know, babe, the faster a man gets up, the more it hurt. You know what I mean? I'm okay, and and so there's some. I think there's some value in grit and being tough, for sure. If you want to be a warrior, definitely. But also this idea that men don't need anything, that they're islands to themselves, the stiff upper lip and all that. That's not doing a service to that person's soul. So yeah, I mean, you got to know where it hurts, and you got to decide what you want to do with it. The choice is yours, and there's no judgment. But just know that you don't have to stay there.
I wonder if John Wayne and all those characters were sort of a symptom of an entirely like a traumatized generation of men. Like you think about all of the wars that happened, and really World War I, World War II, Vietnam, like that was millions of men from the United States, really all around the world, but from the United States where we're from, they were going and they were facing battle, facing death every day, and they come back, and it's like now we come back, and what do we do with this? What do we do with what we saw? And I think that probably culturally, just in that time, it was like, well, you have to be the strong provider, right? Which I think is true. But at the same time, to do that, they thought they had to bury the trauma, bury that maybe guilt of what they feel like they did, the shame. And so you had the John Wayne representation of literally, like, as you said, like, I'm an island, I can do this, nothing hurts. But in fact, inside they were in turmoil.
Yeah. Paired with the warrior archetype and the hero, which made it more palatable, probably.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is that, like, and I'm a sucker for a good Western. Like, I love good Western films. I love John Wayne growing up.
1803, baby. You guys watching that?
Nuh-uh.
Oh, it's
awesome.
awesome.
I've heard, is that the new Yellowstone?
It's like the Oregon Trail story.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's the prequel to Yellowstone.
I should watch that.
It's cowboys and Indians.
But at the same time, the great heroes, we talked about this last week a little bit. The great heroes struggle, and they fail, and they feel, and they love, and there's like this romance attached to them. But you can't be romantic. You can't have a great story arc if there's nothing they're afraid to lose. Right? Like there's something that they have that they value so much that they would give everything for. And I think where men fall short is to act like they don't have that, or to not find what that thing is, not find what hill they're willing to die on. And I think we can numb ourselves out to that. Yeah. I don't know. It's just interesting to look at, just as I was like kind of flowing out of talking about my grandfather, what they experienced, to the strong man, archetypes of the 60s and 70s and even in the 80s. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, because, dude, John McClane, Die Hard.
Schwarzenegger, Stallone.
Yeah. Jean-Claude Van Damme, MacGyver, like all these guys.
MacGyver's a little different, but we could talk about that.
Yeah, but there's like, they were manly men. But I think if you don't address the fear of losing one's love, one's whatever it is, that is the driving force behind the hero. If you don't address the fact that there is something inside that's at war with oneself and that feels and that fears, then we're missing a huge part of the hero's journey.
Yeah.
You said this one time, Brent, when you were talking about kind of your therapeutic process. Because for those who don't know, I'm in grad school as well for clinical mental health counseling.
Yeah.
And we were talking about trauma, right? And you even set up like a tableau for me. You're like, okay, this is your trauma, and this is you, right? And there's a lot of therapy that's like, we're going to start walking you towards that spot in your heart that you fear most, because it was where you feel you were traumatized. And it's like you're getting close to it, and you're like, oh, this hurts so bad, I can't do this, I can't face it. Okay, you're good, I've got you. And it's like the therapist can like pull them back away from this thing. And it's like you're approaching, and it hurts, and it's painful, and you're like wrestling with whatever it is that's like this gripping you and keeping you in chains. And as you're approaching it, rather than marching into it and redeeming it, because I feel like here we go, the harrowing of hell in the Christian story. For Jesus to redeem hell, he had to go there. He died, and he went to the lowest level of hell, and he grabbed Adam and Eve by the hand and marched them out.
Yeah.
Kicked down the gates. I just want to cuss right now.
That's the ultimate. Come on, dude.
Yeah, dude. And that's what it is. Like, I think to redeem that, you have to march into it. And so you would say that rather than like pulling them back when they get there, you say, I know it hurts, but I'm by your side, and we're going to walk into this together.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. How are we doing on time, Jake? Because I feel like there's something really important there.
We're at about 1:05, but honestly, it's cool if this is like a hour and a half.
Let's keep going.
Yeah, I feel like I don't want to stop right in the middle of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Absolutely. And that's why this is a deeper conversation, I think, about, we had talked about last week about danger, the value of danger and being dangerous and experiencing and dealing with danger. And there's a lot of, I'm trying to synthesize this. Well, I'm just going to go for it. So yeah, to describe what you're talking about, it's like, I don't know if y'all can see the table, but you're doing with your hands. It's like, let's say this is your wound.
Bring it closer to you. Yeah, there you go. A little bit closer to you. There you go. You're good.
Can you see that?
You're
let's
in
say
frame.
this is your wound and this is you. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So like, say this is your wound and here you are. This is like the structure of therapy, or the potential of what you can do. So it's like everything inside of you is like, there is this deep intuitive part of you, connected to your subconscious, that knows exactly what hurts and where it hurts. And that part of you is going to be like it's going to like magnetize, and it's going to draw you into that. It's a service. It's like, hey, it's like an alarm. You need to, hey, it's like a smoke alarm or something. Like, hey, we're on fire here. And so automatically you're going to be kind of drawn into your wound automatically. And so, this is where things get so hairy, because if we don't know what we're doing, or if we don't know we have a wound, then this is where we get drawn into our wound, but we're not really aware of that or what's happening. And so this is where we start getting into some trouble, like trying to cope and manage that vortex and that energy and that pull, because it's very confusing, especially if it's not conscious. And so this is why in like trauma circles and trauma therapy circles, there's that phrase. There's many phrases. One of them is, we repeat what we don't repair. Like, we're going to keep running into the thing. And it's like, whether we're conscious or not, and it's our job to make it conscious. Carl Jung said, what the unconscious fails to make conscious, we will experience as fate. And so this idea of like, and you can see it in, like, let's say a girl has an abusive father. Well, we all know the pattern that girl, if she's not healed in that in time, by the time she starts dating, she's going to seek out abusive partners. And it's kind of like, why? Like, why is that happening? Well, the idea is that her wound is causing her to repeat so that she can repair. And so it's like like a part of our unconscious, or our soul, let's say, knows what's happening, knows where it hurts and why it hurts, and it's like drawing us. It's like it loves us. This part of ourselves, and maybe this is God in us, loves us so much that it will push us right into the thing that hurts. So it will hurt us. It's like kind enough to hurt us, to allow us to do or experience something that's really painful. So it's going to draw us into the thing, and it's our job. This is what happens when people come to therapy. This is what they're doing. They're like running into the wall. They're like, they keep wounding themselves. They keep, whether it's an addiction or depression, or it doesn't matter, or like relationship patterns or something. It's like, this is the thing. So if there's a wound, then you're going to be drawn into that, and you're going to keep repeating that cycle, which is why you can't stay in your trauma, going back to what I said earlier. And so this is the image, or the potential is, hey, you're already going to be drawn into this. This is your wound, and it's also your breakthrough and healing. It's a doorway.
Wow.
And so you're going to be drawn into it. And so this is kind of those two sides of therapy, two layers of therapy. And this is a deeper conversation, I think, to some problems, some room for improvement in the therapy space. Is there are some, I think safety has been we've made too much of safety, way too much of safety in our culture, I think, and also in the therapy space. And the therapy space is predominantly, or let's say it's the majority of therapists are female, and rightly so. It's a nurturing field, so rightly so you're going to have that. And also it can be out of balance in that way too, where it's like, everything's about being safe and not being, and eliminating any kind of upsetness or trigger. And that, to me, there's some value in that, in like getting safe. You know, there's a time we need to go to the nest, or the ship needs to go to the harbor to get repaired. But a ship isn't meant to stay in the harbor, and the bird's not meant to stay in the nest. Eventually, you got to spread the wings and get out there again, or the ship, you got to put the sails in and whatever. Sails down. What's the words for that? Ship stuff. Ahoy, man. Anyway. But yeah, so
Set sail.
So this is how I look at it, is I don't mean to be critical, but it's an important part of the conversation, is one layer of therapy, and this is a big part of the therapy space, which is if you're going to choose a therapist, I would have some recommendations. One is going to be, the first part is grounding and making sure that we can move through this where it's not totally overwhelming and it's like we're in an earthquake all the time. So there is safety, and safety is very important. Like triage. Like in a battle, you go to triage, but you don't stay there.
Right.
That would be weird. So we're drawn to our wound, and so it's like, hey, where do you want to go? Like, do you want to go to this wound? You're probably not, but now understand that this is your door. This is your doorway. The only way through is to come back the way you came. And it's going to probably, to some degree, be about the same amount of pain. And that's scary, and it's your choice. You don't have to do that. But just know that it's like, I'm going to have my hand on your back, and I'm not going to push you in there. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to make you do anything. It's this all invitation. But I just want you to know that if you want to be free of this, to be healed, to transmute that scar or that wound into a scar, then we got to go here. We got to go here. And so this is kind of the process, is the closer you get to the wound, the more shaky it gets. And so some people they get close to the wound and it starts to get shaky, and they're like, what do you want to do? Like, I'm right here with you. I'm right next to you. Like, do you want to stay here? Okay, we'll stay here. I'm with you. You're not alone. What do you want to do from here? Do you want to go closer? And then I'll go with you. Do you want to back up and kind of regroup? I'll go with you too. It's your choice. This is your life. This is your choice. And I have no judgment what you do with it. I'm going to walk with you. I'm going to follow you. And so, yeah, if you want to go into the wound and experience your freedom, then just know it's going to get shaky, and just know that I'm going to go with you. But there's something beautiful that happens when we unite with our wound, our origin, or whatever the thing is, and it's a doorway we can transcend the other side. And so, in some ways, going back to the idea of safety, is that's not safe necessarily. Like, you have to embrace the pain and the suck at some level to get there. And that's why anyone who's gone through trauma therapy is so brave and so courageous, because holy cow, man, most people don't do it. It's really scary. So yeah, I think in general, this is the thing. What do you want to do with it? It's an invitation. And then also, don't make too much of safety. Like, if it's triage time, let's triage, but you can't stay there. You have to embrace a certain element of danger, so yeah, I think that's that.
One of the things that you said that I really understood only recently was you go back to like familial patterns. And I never really saw that. I mean, especially since I had a healthy upbringing. But I've seen that in parenting, and I'm excited for you to see this as well, or at least notice it. Is you can have every intention in the world to be different than your parents, or to kind of let your parents' parenting be their ceiling, be your floor, right? That you can build off of. And hopefully through intentionality, break some of those less healthy patterns. But when stress happens and you aren't as intentional, you become your parents so fast if you're not careful. The things that you said, the things that your parents said to you that you hated, you're going to say to your kids. You're going to catch yourself doing it. Some of those same patterns of discipline. Yeah. You could be a soft parent and have the intentionality of soft parenting, of being a gentle parent, but then the minute stress or some trigger happens, you're your dad once again. And I've only recently seen that in my own life. It's been really interesting.
Yeah.
I have a couple thoughts. Could I interject?
Please.
Dude, I love it when you talk, man.
Thanks, man. I'm interested in two things. First off, I want to get your opinion on this, based off of what we're saying. I think that the most powerful scene, one of the most powerful scenes in all of literature and in film, is Frodo and Sam on Mount Doom. Frodo is carrying the burden of the whole world in his pocket, and he has within himself the strength, hopefully at this time, to toss that burden into its place of origin, the fire, and watch it burn away. And Sam, his best friend, one of the greatest characters in literature, just good, once again, good and strong. He says to Frodo, as Frodo's collapsing as he's approaching the fire, he said, "I can't carry your burden for you, but I can carry you."
Yeah.
And he picks Frodo up on his shoulders and walks him up to the fire. And then, there's a scuffle around the fire, which, is very interesting. There's a lot of symbolic imagery there that I think we could go into a whole podcast about.
Can today be like an 8-hour podcast?
Yeah.
I feel like we could keep going.
Yeah.
But would you say that's because I know that you're saying, like, I'm not going to force you into this, right? But I am going to walk beside you. Is that a fair representation of the therapy process to Sam and Frodo? Like, in the moment, like, you cannot carry the burden, but you can be like the shoulder they can lean on?
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, Sam is one of my favorite characters of all time. Yeah, absolutely. It's a supporting role. And there is an important distinction, too, about ownership. Like, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. I can't do it for you, nor would I want to, or even try. That would be so harmful. And it would rob you of all of your power, the power in this, in wound healing. It's like we've seen it in all the Disney movies, like that moment where, like, death is reborn.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking of Beauty and the Beast at the end when the beast becomes the man in that glorious moment. My wife made a funny comment the other day that she's been listening to some of the podcasts, and she's like, "Gosh," well, she said it in it's kind of a different way, but what she pointed out, let's say, was that kind of in some of our dynamics, like, Spencer, you bring up so many deep and thoughtful and rich, like, literature, and Jake, you bring so much of the kind of like light speed, pragmatic, rational and reasoned and thoughtful, speech and talk and conversations, and I bring up movies. And I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, I've heard it said this way: "Hey, I can't take this from you." I learned this from one of my mentors at Onsite. Is kind of this idea of, she calls it "hold the sad," and she was like, "How big is?" And it's so incredible when you see this done. And she did it to me, and it was really powerful. And so she had me kind of come up with something that I'm really like, it's kind of like a wound, or it's something I'm really got a lot of sorrow about, or something like that. Or it could be big. It could be like, what hurts, And she goes, "How big is it? Use your arms." And so, I'd do something like that. And then she came right up behind me, and she put her hands right under my elbows, just gently, just like that. And she goes, "I can't take this from you, but I can help you hold it if you want." And it's like, because I'm not alone in it now.
Yeah.
And I also get it. Like Sam carrying Frodo, like, "Hey, I can't do this part for you. This is yours, but I can carry you." And so, yeah, I think that's such a beautiful picture of that. Is, I can't do it for you, nor do I want to, and that wouldn't be helpful. But I'll go with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be with you, and I'll walk you all the way to the door, baby, and see it. And I'll be the guy like hugging you and high fiving you on the other side. And anyone who's experienced a moment like that, it's I mean, that's what it's all about.
Hmm.
It's glorious.
One more thought I had. Just to apply this once again to our, like, this is the podcast for dreamers, right? This is the podcast of adult imagination, in the sense like we are adults, we are growing up, but we also want to stay in tune with our child, right? The vividness and the imagination of a child.
Childlike, not childish.
Right, exactly. What role does imagination play in therapy?
I mean, everything. A couple podcasts ago, we went real deep into that in some ways, but in this context, everything's imagination. Everything. And so, for instance, different therapeutic modalities, let's say, are going to approach different layers of the human experience, or the soul, maybe. Like, I keep using that word again, soul, because it's kind of like that's what it's all about. But anyway, there are like certain interventions that are about analyzing your thoughts. Let's look at it like left brain and right brain. So some of therapy, which is important, one whole layer of it is, and this is kind of where therapy came from, was psychoanalysis that turned into cognitive behavioral therapy, and a few other interventions that were very much about understanding things from a rational and reasoned perspective, the Socratic method of thinking. So what's the evidence for that thought? And so is that a rational thought or an irrational thought? And there's a lot of value in that, but that's not going to use any imagination. That doesn't evoke imagination. That evokes the rational mind. Mm-hmm. And the rational mind is very important. And some therapies and some therapists, they just hang in that circle. They hang in that sphere of, if you can grasp things rationally, which presupposes objectivity, I think. But if you can grasp things rationally, then you can see that some of your thoughts or experience is not rational. It's like tricking you. It's like a hall of mirrors kind of thing. And so it's kind of like you just learn to dismiss that. You don't take it seriously. And in some ways that's helpful, I think, definitely. But the way that I've been taught and trained in therapy from a trauma-informed perspective and in the experiential model is that's not enough. I don't think that's ultimately going to be helpful for most people, because there's a whole other side of our experience, which is the right brain. This is the realm of intuition, imagination, like space, time, our sense of time and space, and creativity and abstraction and emotion. And so that's where all the imagination is. And in my view, if you can't access that part, you won't fully heal. You're just going to be in that first layer of learning how to cope. But imagination is kind of going back to invoking the inner child, where, the first part of our brain when we're born is the right brain. That's the brain that's online, and which is why children are so magical in that way, and so imaginative and free and unbound, unbridled in that way. So I think the rationality piece, the left brain piece, is the last piece. I don't even worry about that unless we need to up front. That's like the capstone. That's the one that retells the story. You know what I mean? That's the narrator at the end. That sums it all up.
I love that.
But the imagination, the right brain, this is the deep work, the experiential work. And psychodrama is one of those interventions we've played around with a little bit, that just it bypasses left brain completely. Don't worry about that. Let's get right into the weird kind of goo, So yeah, I think I think that probably is a good way to explore that. Mm-hmm. Is rationality and reason are good. And you can see this too in the division between East and West in many ways, and cultural divide. The Western world has definitely, children of the Enlightenment. We are, and we've built, there's a lot of value in that, and the scientific method was kind of refined and polished up in that movement. And then that led to the Industrial Revolution, which lifted so many people out of poverty for the first time in the entire planet. And there's so much value to it, but also it can become like this rational machine that dehumanizes. Mm-hmm. when it's taken too far. And we're in our culture, we're experiencing all of that, the results of that. The 20th century, just look at that. But the human being, the soul, the right brain, the imaginative part of you must be reckoned with. It always will.
Yeah.
And so that's, it's kind of like atheists aren't really atheists. You know what I mean? It's like they're just denying the story that they're living in. Doesn't mean that it's not affecting them, that it is not also interacting with them. They're just denying it. And so, yeah. You can't have. I think reason and rationality are very important, but just like in the cycle of life, it's not there at the beginning; it comes later, and then we can get stuck there. We can like build a whole world there, and then forget about, and then our heart haunts us ever since.
So, like the therapeutic process would be essentially, you have the symptom management, which may be that more like left brain rational. It's like taking a pill to lower inflammation. But you don't want to just take the pill to lower inflammation your whole life. At the end of the day, you want to get to the root,
right,
and pull it out.
Yeah.
And so to get to the root, you can stay in that place where you just manage the symptoms for the rest of your life.
And that's better than how it was.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's better than how it was. But if you want to get to the point where you're healed and you're thriving again, or for the first time, you have to move into that layer of intuition and mystery and, as you said, the goo. It's like there's something there that has to be reckoned with that you may not be able to understand, but it's still real. It's still metaphysically true.
Yeah. And if I can offer this, that it requires ego death. Everything, no matter how you explore this, it seems like ego death is always the thing. The cycle of the phoenix that rises from the ashes. So whether you're exploring, in Christianity, in the gospel, we get up on the cross and we die to be born again. We lay down our life to find it. And then you got like the realm of therapy, where, well, let's say like philosophy, meditation, and kind of more the metaphysical esoteric journey. It requires ego death. You come to the end of yourself where you realize that you get to that place where you break out of your individuality and you realize that we're all one, we're all connected. And so it's kind of this paradox of being one, but being many, being connected. Psychedelics, the same thing. If you go on the psychedelic journey, people who have experienced that understand that you have to let go, you have to surrender, you have to come to the end of yourself in a psychedelic experience. Otherwise, it's going to be hell. You're like fighting the whole thing. You have to come to what they call an ego death. You have to just give into it, and then something perhaps profound and beautiful can happen on the other side. Now, I'm not recommending psychedelics. There's a lot of risk involved, and that's a deeper conversation about there's a lot of danger and risk. And once you consider like the spiritual realm, I think, that's anyway, I don't want to sidebar there, but yeah, it requires ego death. You have to come to the end of yourself, and therapy is the same way. So if you want to, going back to the thing, if you want to go into this wound, which is your doorway, it's going to hurt. It's going to be scary. And you're going to have to surrender to that and at some point let go, which is kind of the process of forgiveness too. Interesting. And then in that we can be reborn. So yeah.
Thanks, man.
And then if I may, I don't know where we're at with time, but what I would love to offer here is in the realm of, this is a podcast for dreamers. And so could you read that quote again?
Yeah,
Tolstoy?
absolutely. It is, respect was invented to cover the empty place where love should be.
Yeah. Well, my question for y'all is, what does that mean to you now on the other side of this exploration? And then how does this apply to dreams and dreamers? Like this dichotomy between love and respect. And is it a dichotomy at all?
I think about something entirely different, even from like the love and respect conversation because we touched so many things. I hear communication matters in relationships, like pivotal in relationships, and that it seems like some of the same grievances are just different symptoms being described or the same symptom being described in different ways. And most of that seems to stem from communication and communicating love in a relationship. And then, in just the general conversation, verbiage matters, language matters, and the accuracy especially. Because that's what we just got into was like, well, love and respect. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's value. Well, what does it mean to be valued? Well, what about pride? Well, what does it mean to be, what does pride look like? You know, what does love look like? Like we just got into that whole, what does everything mean? You know, like everything's pretty existential and we're just breaking down essentially every single definition. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, one of the points of our podcast, one of the points that we state and believe is that every person is a dreamer. You don't have to be an artist to be a dreamer, you know? That it isn't something that some people have and some people don't. Mm-hmm. And so as a person, as a dreamer, as someone who desires love and respect, this is a dance we're in as people, as we're dealing with all the things we've talked about today: family, trauma, the hero's journey. These are all, it's a dance between dreams and humanity and our deepest needs. You know, our deepest need, I think, is to be loved. Our deepest human need is to be loved. And the best thing we can do for ourselves and for others is to be people of love. Mm-hmm. And so I think...
Love and grit, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that is where it connects for me, is that to be human is to be a dreamer, is to be loved, or at least desiring of it.
Yeah.
And a way that you can show love is to show respect.
Yeah.
Is a way, not the way, but a way.
That's good, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think when I think about dreaming and dreamers, I agree that we're all dreamers because we're all human. It's like synonymous. You can't be one without the other, whether or not you acknowledge it. Same thing with artists. I think we're all artists. You know, we're made in the image of God, who's the creator. So we all have the potential to create, even if what we create is mayhem or nihilism.
Yeah.
And so those are all choices we can make. But for me, I think that a dreamer is synonymous most with a desirer. And so in that way, we're all human. We're all desirers. There's something that you want. You may not know that you want it, but there's something that we want. And when you drill it down to the core, love may be the thing. We want to be seen, heard, and accepted. We want to belong. And so, yeah, to dream is to desire. And so going back to love and respect, I would say that if you two things, if your desire is not all about and doesn't have love, then it's not really a desire, maybe. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It might be like a reaction. You know, like the villain, in the archetype of the villain. There's no love in it. There's something they want, but it's not really something they want. It's a reaction. It's like someone wounded them and they took the wrong path long ago, and they're just stuck in it, you know? Which is why Luke Skywalker didn't kill his dad.
Right.
So yeah, I think if there's not love in it, then it's not desire. You love and respect, you know, you can't have one without the other. And then the other thing I'd say is if you don't respect your desire, if you don't respect your desiring self, your desiring heart, the gravity and the kind of atomic power and magnetism of your desire, capital D. If you don't respect that, then it's going to wipe you out. It's going to wipe you out. You're going to end up chasing idols. You're going to end up chasing externalities. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think love and respect in that way, for the dreamer, there's something that you want, good, which means probably there's something that you love or someone, good, and it's kind of the ushering into, maybe this is part of the masculine journey too, is ushering into, it's a treacherous road, it's a treacherous path, and so there's some caution in the wind, and that the hero's journey, the story arc, and the path, the sirens, there's all these things that we have to watch out for, which I think is important. And then, maybe it's all about love. You were talking about Dante's poem about climbing the mountain, and the different levels of
Purgatory.
Different levels of purgatory, yeah. And so it's kind of at the bottom, I guess it would be, maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but like Hades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's broken up into three things where you have Inferno, which is hell, right? And that's and even hell has levels of brokenness and pain. Mm-hmm. Purgatory is the people that are marked for heaven but can't let themselves accept the love and grace given to them. Mm-hmm. So they keep themselves there.
Yeah.
And there's layers there too.
Yeah.
But the higher on the mountain you climb, the easier it becomes to climb.
Yeah.
Is what he says. So when you're still at the bottom, it's like the way his world is structured like a giant mountain, right? And at the pinnacle is paradise, and in between you have purgatory, and at the base of the mountain you have hell, right? Or below the mountain. And as you climb purgatory towards paradise, as you shed all that stuff, you're taking off bags, right? It's like you start you start at the bottom with a pack full of food you have to use to get to the top, right? And as you eat it, the pack comes lighter, right? As you shed the things you don't need anymore. And so, and even as you get more tired climbing the mountain, it gets easier because you're getting closer to where you're meant to be. It's like you're getting closer to home.
Like love without attachment at some level, or without a need. Yeah, I've been feasting at the table of Jonathan Pajot, and he goes really into symbolism and the Christian tradition, the Orthodox tradition, and which is so interesting. Being born and raised as an evangelical, to get in there, he's just lighting me up. But one of the things that he had mentioned talking about that story is that it's all about love. Like the people in hell or people in Hades, or at the various levels, let's say, as you're going towards paradise, they're not there because they've been condemned necessarily. They're there because they want to be there. Like they love something. There is something they love, and they've just loved that thing, that external, too much. You know what I mean? Like they love it so much that they choose to stay there, and the invitation still exists to climb the mountain. But that's going to require to lessen the grip on the love of this thing, whatever it might be, and to take the hand, as you say, and climb back, find something even greater.
Yeah, I mean that's also the great divorce. Yes, Lewis.
Yeah.
Like it's the decision. Like God gives you what you want. If you want pure, unadulterated selfishness, you can have it.
Yeah.
If you want freedom, you can have it.
Yeah. So it's such an interesting concept, this idea of that, like, people perhaps in hell, let's say, are there because that's what they want. That's where they want to be, which is kind of a paradigm shift in some ways from what I was taught, in that, they didn't figure it out or they're wicked and now they're being punished. It's just an interesting flip of that.
We could have this conversation sometime for sure.
Yeah. But anyway, back to the dreaming thing. The whole point of it was, if you don't respect your desire, then it can like pigeonhole you, or it can freeze you, it can stop you, it can hurt you if you don't love it, or if you love it too much. I mean, and if you don't respect it enough.
One last thing you said the word freeze. Let me just say this about Dante. Dude, it's okay. Let's do this thing. It's great. One last thing that Dante says in Hades, in Inferno, is, we picture Inferno. I mean, Inferno we think of as fire. When you actually get to the lowest level of Hades, Satan is there encased in ice. He's actually frozen.
Oh, wow.
So it's like this being frozen where you are, frozen in your selfishness. Wow. Frozen in your pride. So I think that's really interesting because you don't normally see that. You see like the giggling, goat hooved, like, but it's actually more so like frozen, and there are people frozen near him too. Like the worst of the worst in Dante's eyes.
That spreads.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The coldness.
Dude.
Incredible, right?
That's
so
amazing.
good.
I had never heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like that infests.
Yeah.
That mentality of nothing matters and making other people